Good morning. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Taz and welcome to my booktube channel, Tazisbooked. For those of you who aren't so new here, hi, it's been a while. I think the last time I had filmed a booktube video was like 9 or 10 months ago. It was a really long time. I am indeed alive. I think in my last reading vlog, I had kind of talked about this job application process that I was going through, and I did end up getting the job, which was really great for me, but that meant that my life exploded. This current job that I'm working at is a lot more time intensive than my previous job. On top of that, I had also started therapy, so my mental health has just been roller coastering all over the place. So I haven't been as active on this channel. I have been pretty active on Instagram and TikTok because, I don't know, for whatever reason, I got it into my head that Instagram and TikTok are just for funsies and long form videos are work. But over the last few months, I've really missed doing long form channel and I've really missed booktube. So I come to you in January 2023 with a reading recap of the entire last year. Since it's been a while, I figured I would not only do my top 5 books of the year, which if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I do a top 5 roundup of my favorite books that I read this past year, but I also wanted to talk about webcomics that I started and continued on and kept up with throughout this year. So I have my stack of top 5 here, but I figured we would start with honorable mentions first. So I have my iPad and I'm actually just going to pull up the list of books that I read last year and we will just go in chronological order. I would be absolutely remiss if I talked about my reading last year and did not mention this manga series. So for the category of let's call favorite manga, we have Sweat and Soap, the entire 11 volume series. This book might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it was to me so cute. I read it in February, so it was like the perfect Valentine's Day read because it's about this woman who works for a luxury fragrance company, and she is really thankful to this company that she works for because throughout her entire life, she had been bullied about the way that she excessively sweats, so she's really conscious about how she smells. And she credits this company with producing products that make her feel confident. One day she runs into a product developer, so their lead like fragrance developer, and he loves the way she smells. So that's just kind of how they meet, which is such a strange premise, but I promise it's one of the cutest things you will ever read. The 11 volumes basically follows the progression of their relationship and into marriage. It's just a really cute, healthy chronology? It just follows this couple's relationships and all of the highs and lows without being toxic in any of the problems that it presents. It's just a couple dealing with everyday problems, and I thought it was just so cute. I mean, I'm smiling like a fool right now. Definitely put it onto your TBR for 2023. For this category, we're going to call it books that I couldn't stop thinking about, but not necessarily in a good way. They were just books that I couldn't get out of my head. And I think it's really important to point out that I didn't not enjoy them. They just made me feel strangely. So we've got a fiction and a nonfiction in this category, and the fiction book is Milkfed by Melissa Broder. I do need to just say, I will read anything Melissa Broder writes. I read The Pisces by her, and now I've read Milkfed, and both of those are just grotesquely good. It's not a perfect book by any means. I read it almost as satire, actually. It follows Rachel, who is in her early to mid 20s. She's a lapsed Jew and she has a very severe eating disorder. So side note, if you're going to read this book, definitely look up trigger warnings, definitely take care of yourself. This isn't a book for everyone. I have a history of eating disorders in my past and it was triggering for me at times, but despite that, I still enjoyed reading it. Anyway, Rachel has a really complex relationship with her mother, so her therapist recommends that she take a 90-day excommunication from her mother, and this book is just chock full of mommy issues and queer desire. It was an interesting read. Like, this book is very, very weird. It's not like a masterpiece or anything like that. If you are just in the mood to pick up a weird, strange book, this might be the book for you. The nonfiction in this category is a memoir, and it's What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. The good parts about this book that I really liked was that this book chronicles the author's journey with CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, and I really liked how her journalistic side really shone through in the research and development of this book. The reason it made me feel some type of way, and not to delve too deeply into my own mental health diagnoses, but let's just say this book simultaneously hit too hard. It also made my mind sort of gloss over its response to the content. This was also a book that I ended up inhaling despite my own reaction to it. It made me uncomfortable, and I think everyone should read things that make them uncomfortable. So if CPTSD is something that interests you, or there is someone in your life that lives with it, I highly recommend picking it up. The next category is my favorite YA that I read this year, and easily, hands down, this honorable mention goes to The Love Match by Priyanka Taslim, which comes out tomorrow. If you liked To All the Boys I Loved Before and you're a big fan of Jane Austen, you gotta pick this book up. This book is chock full of Sylheti Bengali representation and just eldest daughter feels, the cutest fake dating relationship, as well as a love triangle, which I'm not a big love triangle person, but I think this one was done in a way that was not irksome. There's also meddling mothers and puns and amazing side characters. It not only talked about immigrant struggles, but also classism within the South Asian community, which I found to be really refreshing because that is a conversation within brown communities that just isn't happening enough. It was warm like a cup of tea, and I just think everyone should read this book because it just made me feel so happy and so seen. But probably my favorite part about the book is that it features not one, but two Bengali love interests, and of course a Bengali main character. I'm really happy to see that because I've spoken ad nauseum about how important it is to have Bengali representation, or just representation in general, reflected in publishing. And even within the South Asian community, there's always sort of been this attitude where Bengalis are not seen as desirable as other South Asians. And it was just really nice to see that, like, yes, Bengalis are the main characters and they are the love interests. Now we're going to talk about my favorite graphic novel that I read this year, and it's going to be two because they're a duology, but my favorite graphic novel that I read this year was actually middle grade, and it was Garlic and the Vampire and its follow-up, Garlic and the Witch. I don't know whether you'll know this about me, but I love vegetables. I think they're so cute. And I love when we have stories about vegetables personified, which is exactly this graphic novel. Garlic and the Vampire and Garlic and the Witch follows Garlic, a really shy, nervous, anxious character who really just prefers to tend to her garden and stay close to home. But then a vampire moves into a nearby castle, and all of the vegetable folk are convinced that Garlic has to be the one to vanquish the evil vampire. So as to not let down her friends, she goes, and it just follows along her journey of gaining her confidence, stepping out of her comfort zone, and realizing she's a lot braver than she actually is. I thought it was so heckin' cute. This book just made me feel fuzzy and happy and cozy. The artwork is incredible. I could read 10 more books in the same art style following Garlic. My favorite fantasy that I read this year was hard to pick out because we had some really heavy contenders like Geiki by Vaishnavi Patel, The Wolf of Oren Yarrow by K.S. Veloso, The Oleander Sword by Tasha Suri, which, if you know me, You know how much I love Priya and Malini. But the fantasy book that I ultimately couldn't get out of my head was The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. The Stardust Thief is the first in a trilogy, which I'm really excited to continue on. That follows Luli, who is a criminal and a thief, and her Jinn bodyguard, who is the love of my life. She ends up saving a cowardly himbo golden retriever prince, and it also had incredible Arab representation, which I'm so on board for. But the main characters are on this quest to find this magical hidden lamp. I think what makes this book stand out from other fantasies for me was that I found that the 4 point of views that the book went back and forth from were actually really well done and very interesting to read, because you could very much understand the motivations through each person's POV. I think the next book in this series comes out this year, so I'm really looking forward to that. For webcomics that I either started or continued on this year, I wanted to just briefly mention them. The first one that I do want to mention is True Beauty. True Beauty was my entry point into webcomics, and while it technically ended this year, I've been very happy to follow the spin-off episodes that have been coming out periodically. If you're not familiar, there is a whole entire backlog of episodes for you to go back and read. True Beauty follows Jukyoung, who is a little horror-loving, geeky girl in high school, and she is not considered to be very conventionally attractive. She has acne, she wears glasses. One day she's gotten so sick of the bullying that she discovers makeup tutorials online and basically becomes a little makeup expert. And so when she starts high school, she becomes really popular, and there's a love interest who is the most attractive boy in school, as well as the other most attractive boy in school. This was also a love triangle that I did not mind, but maybe I think I have different rules for web comics and graphic novels and manga than I do for something that's like written. Anyway, there are hundreds of episodes. There's also a K-drama if that's something you're into. I really personally enjoyed the K-drama. The next one that I continued on was Under the Oak Tree. This one is a romance fantasy webcomic, and it's just vibes for me. Everything kind of feels like it's slowly starting to come together right now. We're about 60 episodes in, and it follows this woman named Maximilian who has a stutter and whose father has abused her in the past, but now, since he has married her off to the most decorated knight in the realm, she's trying to figure out this new life and love in a new place. So there's some magic in it. It's just a good time. I also learned this year that I really enjoy revenge plot lines in webcomics. So the first one that I'm going to mention is My Husband, My Sister, and I, which is exactly what it sounds like. On the night of her 4th wedding anniversary, Lady Liana discovers that her husband is cheating on her with her twin sister, and instead of just starting forth the divorce proceedings, she decides to take her revenge. This webcomic is wild. There are so many twists and turns that have happened in like less than 60 episodes. It's wild. I eagerly await the updates to this story every week. The other revenge webcomic that I really have been enjoying this year is Marry My Husband. This one has a reincarnation storyline. So Jiwon is a 30-something cancer patient. She's had really shit luck in her life, and one day she gets this diagnosis from her doctor that she just doesn't have enough time to live, so she decides to go home to live out the rest of her life with her husband comfortably. When she gets home, she finds out that her husband has been cheating on her with her best friend, which really goes to show you that men ain't shit. There are words, people get angry, and her husband ends up murdering her. However, she gets a second chance at life where she gets brought back in time, I think 10 years ago, to before her and her husband got engaged, and she wants to see if she can have not only a different outcome in her life, but also to take preemptive revenge on her husband and best friend. Now that we have webcomics out of the way, we are ready to talk about my top 5 books that I read in 2022. These are going to go in no particular order, except for the top book of the year, because I just loved that book so much. But the first one that I'm going to talk about is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reed last year. I really enjoy their writing style and the gothic horror fantasy that they tend to write. It's a retelling of the Juniper Tree story, which I'm not actually super familiar with, but it follows Marlon Chen, who is the youngest daughter of the village wizard, who is cursed and is hating the industrialization of the world around him. During the day, her and her sisters are sequestered away, forbidden from interacting with the outside world outside of their clientele by their authoritative, abusive father. But when night comes, after they have kind of sated their father's unnatural appetite and he's gone off to bed, they then creep into the city to have as normal of a life they can, which involves going to the ballet. When she meets a really pretty ballet dancer and the two hit it off despite the odds, Marlon Chen really struggles to reconcile with her own desires. It's a very good book. To me, this read as sort of an examination of survivorhood, especially surviving abuse. Because it is gothic horror fantasy and those elements blend very seamlessly, and because of the content matter that is explored in this book, I highly recommend you check out the content warnings before reading this book. The next book is a book that I'm not really sure I'm going to actually be able to properly encapsulate how I feel about it, and that book is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. This book is so good. I read it back in March and it has stayed with me throughout the course of the entire year. Every so often I will think about the characters in this book and remember how sad I was and just truly sobbing when I finished this book.
So I just finished All My Rage. Oh my god. I need 5 to 7 business days to process this book.
If you're a fan of Sabaa Tahir, if you're Muslim, if you like contemporary historical fiction, read this book. The grief that is explored in this book is absolutely heart-wrenching. I will recommend this book to everyone until the day I die. It is so just gut-punchingly good. I also think that anyone within the South Asian diaspora will be able to deeply relate to these characters. Please pick it up if you haven't. The next book was also a book that I read in the beginning of the year. It was like my first reads of the entire year, and that was Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. This book is so good. I feel like this video is just an amalgamation of me screaming about how books are so good. At its core, Lonely Castle in the Mirror is about friendship. It follows 7 children who are facing various things at home and at school, and they are feeling very increasingly isolated from the people around them. Then they discover that the mirror in their bedroom is a portal, and they step through, because why wouldn't you step through a magical mirror, and find that there are people who not only understand what they're going through, that this portal space is an escape from the world around them. I'm a really big fan of coming of age stories, and I think this definitely qualifies as one of them, as it explores adolescence and mental health in your adolescence. Also, the ending, the author is so smart. I don't know how they pulled that ending together. Sometimes I still think about it. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to shut up right now, but if you haven't read it, read this book. This book is literally a Studio Ghibli movie, just on pages. The next book is also one that I have sobbed over, and that book is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Kato. As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow follows Selma, who is a pharmacy student turned surgeon because of the Syrian Revolution. Selma lives with her very pregnant sister-in-law, and they are trying to figure out whether they will be staying in Syria and trying to ride out the revolution, or escaping by sea to risk their lives on that journey to somewhere that is more safe. The problem is that Selma's PTSD has manifested into an actual human being that only she can see, speak to, interact with, named Goff, who is pushing her to get herself to safety. If you're on this channel, I don't think I really need to speak about the implications, the very real world implications that this book was inspired by and drawn from. I think most of us can remember with heart-wrenching clarity the images of refugees washing up on European shores during the revolution, and to read this fictionalized version of it, I think also really drove home the gravity of the situation. I firmly believe that this book should be required reading across all classrooms. It is so good, but please take care of yourself while reading it. And finally, my top spot for the books that I read in 2022. It is technically 2 books, but each book is a novella. They are in a duology, so I'm just counting them as 1 book. As you know, I started a new job this year and was settling into it and have been very busy. It's been extremely hard for me to take care of myself and not let thoughts of imposter syndrome creep up. I've also been dealing with a lot of mental health stuff that I have found difficult to get a grasp of, and this book came, or I guess this duology came at the right time. And that is A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. This was a cozy sci-fi story that follows a monk, a tea monk specifically, and their robot friend. In this story, robots had a rise of consciousness, I want to say hundreds of years ago, and had retreated into the woods, never to be interacting with humans ever again. The whole AI rise up thing. When the tea monk, who is facing sort of an existential crisis, goes into the woods to try to find their purpose again, they run into this robot, and this robot has been tasked with finding out one thing that humanity needs. This book was such a good reminder that it is just okay to exist sometimes. It is okay to feel. It is okay to just be. With how busy my life has been this past year, it was also a really good reminder for me to just slow down and just celebrate the everyday simplicity that is in the world around us. I loved Mosscap, the robot. I think that Mosscap was just so quaint, and he had a joie de vivre that was really infectious for me. It made me really just want to appreciate the little details in my life, and it was a stark reminder to do so. I think the dedication page in the first novella says it all for anybody who could use a break. So yeah, that is it. That is everything that I really enjoyed reading in 2022. I'm now going to take my very cold tea and reheat it up and get started with the rest of my day. But I did want to wish you all a very happy new year. I hope 2023 brings you everything you've been looking for. And I am excited to say that I will be seeing you in a new video soon. Until then, bye.